All right, so welcome to lesson 4.2 on common biological ions and effects. So, in the last video, we talked about generally what is an ion and what it does in our body. So, in this video, we're going to talk about the 5 common ions in our body. What do they do? And what are some symptoms we might experience if we don't have enough of that ion? And what are some symptoms we might experience if we have too much or high concentration of that ion? And for practice problems, I'm going to give you a patient with a series of symptoms, and you're going to have to be able to let me know which ion they might have too much or too little of. Now, before I go over these symptoms and things like that, know that when we are diagnosing patients, we often don't just use symptoms, right? We often have tests that are more quantitative or numerical that are much more accurate than this. And this is just our general introduction to some symptoms that we might experience. And later on in this unit, we're going to talk about more accurate tests in order to figure out what ions a person has that is either too high of a concentration or they have too much in their body, or too low of a concentration they have too little of in their body. So after this video is going to be this PDF, right? And in this PDF, everything in red you do need to know. In order to save yourself some time, feel free to print this out and glue this into your notes, or if you're taking your notes digitally, also feel free to save it or have a copy of it, right? If you do need a physical copy, let me know, and I can link that to you directly as well. So I'm just going to go over how to read over this document rather than read over every single one separately, right? Since I'm pretty sure you can read on your own. So here on the first column are the 5 common ions that we're going to talk about in this class. So we're going to start with sodium, potassium, magnesium, so on and so forth. Right? In this second column, reading down, this is what the ion does inside our body. Right? Mainly the parts in red you need to know. Don't worry so much about the parts in blue, right? A couple of terms that you might not know is things like regulating osmotic pressure, blah, blah, blah. So usually if I describe anything like that, I'll say the common English description next to it, right? Or swelling in the cell. So if you have too much or too little sodium, you might notice swelling in the cell. Basically what that means in the formal definition or the formal term in science, we call that osmotic pressure, right? So if you have, so the second column is just the function. Here in the third column, this is the effect or symptoms you might experience if you have too low of a concentration or not enough of this ion in your body. So for example, if you don't have enough sodium ions in your body, you might feel lethargic or tired. Symptoms of confusion, lightheadedness, muscle twitching, in extreme cases, coma, right? So some of these are very, very rare and in extreme cases that almost will never happen. But I would imagine that if you ever play sports, there might be a time where you just like are playing sports, doing your thing, and then like your leg starts spasming and you're like, oh, why is it twitching? What's going on? So oftentimes that's a sign of low sodium or low magnesium, right? Or sometimes another symptom of that would be extremely painful, like muscle cramps in a very localized area. Right? When I was doing cross country, I would often keep a packet of soy sauce or mustard. And it sounds really gross, but if that ever happened to me, I would just open that mustard packet and kind of like slurp all of that up. in order to get a quick intake of sodium and magnesium, especially magnesium through the mustard packets, right, in order to prevent my muscle from twitching in the future. Because that probably means I was just sweating too much, my body was too tired, and I need to replenish my salt concentrations, right? So in this column are all the symptoms you would feel if you have too little of either sodium, potassium K, or magnesium, so on and so forth. In this very last column, these are the symptoms that you would feel if you have too much sodium or too much of a certain ion, right? Or in this case, a symptom if you have a high concentration of this ion, right? So things like this, these are your usual symptoms. Right. Another random fun fact and side note that if you ever have nails that kind of look like this, right? Again, there are a lot of reasons why your nail might have this white coloration. And it might be because you just scratched yourself, or you might be sick or have been attacked by a flu virus, right? But another reason is that you might be low in calcium or magnesium, right? So something to notice in yourself, right? So at this point, feel free to go over to the other PDF and take note of all of this and pause this video and then come back to me when you're ready, because I'm going to go over how to solve this problem. Right. Okay, so hopefully you have this chart down either physically or digitally somewhere next to you, and we're going to use it to solve a problem that's similar to this. All right, so here's our example problem. A patient A has been waking up in the middle of the night with lower leg spasms. This lasts for a few seconds to 10-second intervals. They don't have any headaches, and their sodium levels are also normal. They do show some signs of weak bones or osteoporosis. What ion or ions do you think is affecting patient A? And do they have too much or too little? Meaning, do they have too low of a concentration or too high of a concentration? So let's look at the symptoms again, and let's note that. So that's my first step. So step one is just to ID what symptoms I have. Right? So they have muscle spasms. They don't have any headaches, so maybe this is important. Let's note that as well. And their sodium levels are normal. So I know that it can't be sodium. And they do show some signs of weak bones or osteoporosis. So the things I'm looking for are muscle spasms or twitching, no headaches, got a D there, and weak bones or osteoporosis. Hopefully you remember this from the first quarter. So now that I have my symptoms, I'm basically just going to look and read over the effects, low concentration and high concentration. And look for which symptoms have muscle spasms and weak bones or osteoporosis. Right. So as I'm reading through this one has much muscle twitching, but this one is sodium or Na. If you don't know this, I would recommend that you go to ptable.com. And then you can look for sodium, Na, right? So I would find Na and recognize that, oh, this is sodium. So it might not be sodium or Na because we said it wasn't sodium. So maybe let's erase that. That's not one of my options. How about this one? Muscle weakness, irregular heartbeat. That might be it. So let's put this as maybe. I'm going to keep reading here and see, specifically look for muscle spasms or muscle twitching. Right, so here we go. Got a symptom for muscle twitching here and then muscle twitching here. Both of these are related to osteoporosis or weak bones, right? So I could say that, hey, maybe they are low in Mg plus or magnesium, or my patient is low in calcium or 2 plus. And the reason why I say that they are low in this is because I'm reading the symptoms in the low concentration column. So this means that they don't have enough, right? So going back to here to finalize my answer, I'm going to guess or estimate that my patients, which ions are affecting my patients? Well, it's probably Mg, magnesium, or calcium. Ions, and I know that they probably have too little. Or more accurately, I should say they probably have a low concentration of both. Excuse this little mistake there, just ignore that. Because muscle spasms and osteoporosis are symptoms of low magnesium or calcium. I'm just going to write these two versions in shorts, right? So again, a reminder that very rarely, almost never, do we just look at basic symptoms to diagnose patients. There are further tests which we just haven't learned yet, right? But I just want to get you started getting familiar with what these symptoms tend to be, and then how to get a general idea of what might be causing the issue before we run those tests even further, right? So now you should be ready to complete the quiz. On the next slide, the questions are going to be very similar, but with slightly different symptoms.